Welcome to the Cedar Creek Bible in a Year podcast. Whether you are listening on your own, with a friend, or a group of friends, we hope this podcast helps you connect with Scripture and also enriches your relationship with God. Here are your hosts, Luke Shortridge and Andy Rechtenwald.
Hello everyone, Cedar Creek Radio is on the air. Luke Shortridge hanging out with the Andy Rechtenwald. Andy, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you, Luke?
I'm doing amazing. So we are moving right along here, and today we're looking at the book of Deuteronomy. Andy, Deuteronomy has a very important verse in it called the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4.
Okay.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. Have you heard of this before? Are you familiar with this?
Yes, because I listened to a podcast by a guy who's an Orthodox Jew, and he's talked about how important this verse is for them. I don't know why, but I know that the Shema.
Yeah, it is extremely important in Judaism. It is a creed, I would say, where they use it on a continuous basis. They open their worship services with it. It's really pivotal. It defines who they are. So it's a saying that they would repeat over and over. They'd hear it as a young kid. And it was basically a brief, authoritative formula of religious belief. A creed.
A creed.
So today we're doing creed trivia.
Wait a second. Creed trivia?
Oh, yeah.
Or creedal trivia?
No.
Oh,
creed.
Yes.
So, Andy,
right.
you tend to be a Creed aficionado. I think you're going to do very well in this. What? Tell us about your love affair with the band Creed.
I mostly have a love affair with Scott Stapp.
Okay, who is Scott Stapp for all the listeners at home?
He is the vocalist of the band Creed.
Okay.
He's a man of many talents.
We'll get to some of those.
Has a beautiful voice. And one that is very unique that you would not mistake.
Now,
many people compare Creed to Nickelback.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that because Nickelback sucks. So
they're Canadian.
There's that too.
All
I was watching a show where he said, "Do you guys want to hear some more Nickelback?" The lead singer, and everybody in the crowd said, "No!" So he put the mic on the stand and they walked off the stage. That was the end of their concert.
Funny. These people are brutally honest.
It's true.
All right, let's jump right in. Creed is an American rock band formed in 1993. In which state of the U.S. did the members meet each other? Bonus if you can name the city.
Jeez, I have no idea. No clue.
You really don't know what state they're from?
No. There's 50 states, so I have a 1 in 50 shot.
Alaska?
Not a lot of rock bands coming from Alaska, I don't think.
California?
Incorrect, sir. Incorrect. It is Florida.
Florida.
They're from the mighty Orange State, and they're from Tallahassee.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. See, I would have never gotten that.
Man, I'm getting a little worried here. I thought you were going to nail these.
No, I'm not. Okay. I feel like I should keep my persona up. I'm a big Creed fan.
Got it. Okay, let's keep moving on. The band's best-known lineup consists of vocalist Scott Stapp, we talked about, guitarist and vocalist Mark Tremonti? Okay, he's important. Bassist Brian Marshall and drummer Scott Phillips. Who was the first person to leave the band in the year 2000? I'll say their names again. Scott Stapp, Mark Tremonti, Brian Marshall, or drummer Scott Phillips.
Brian Marshall did what?
Who was the first? Oh, he was the bassist.
He left first.
That is correct, sir.
Bassist,
well done.
Man.
Mark played bass on the third studio album, Weathered, and then he left.
Well.
Okay, you know a little more than you let on to. The band disbanded then in 2004 due to increased tension between members. Scott Stapp pursued a solo career, while Tremonti, Marshall, and Phillips went on to found what other alternative group?
Oh, it was like something Bridge.
You're halfway correct.
Wait, I'm getting there. Alter Bridge.
Yes!
I'll
Nice
never
job,
forget
sir.
when that happened.
In 2009, after months of speculation, Creed reunited for a new album and toured until the end of 2012. Another album was planned, but since it's been shelved. What was the name of their fourth and final studio album?
Creed.
No.
Dang it.
Good guess.
Scott Stapp and the Creeds?
No, you have no idea. It was Full Circle.
Oh, that
How
makes
ironic.
sense.
Come on.
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense.
Did you purchase Full Circle?
No, I did not.
No one did. Okay. The instrumental members turned their attention back to Alter Bridge, and then Tremonti formed his own band while Scott Stapp joined something called Art of Anarchy. True or false, there are currently no plans for Creed to reunite.
False.
Nope, it's true, sadly.
Well, here's the deal. My brother Mike is in a band that travels around, and they were at the Alternative Press Award, or the Alternative Press Awards, and Creed opened up for the show.
What?
Creed did. I have a video of it because Mike was yelling, "Take me higher!" Oh yeah!
What year was this?
This is like 2 years ago, a year or two ago.
Oh my gosh! All my research lied to me.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying they're getting back together, but they definitely played together.
All right, let's keep moving on. True or false? Creed was the 19th best-selling artist of the 2000s.
19th?
True or false?
False.
You are right. You want to take a guess what they actually were?
15th.
Better.
12th.
Better.
9th.
Yes!
Ha
They
Got it.
sold 53 million albums worldwide, Andy.
Wow.
Just so you know.
53 million.
All right. Question. The band released 3 consecutive multi-platinum albums. Which one has been certified diamond, their highest selling album of all time?
Jars of Clay. What's it called? What do they call it?
I'm going to...
They've won something clay or something clay in it or something.
Yeah, I'm going to give you credit for that.
I know
Human
Jars of
Clay.
Human Clay. I know Jars of Clay's a band. Whatever.
Human Clay. 11.6 million in the U.S. I guess going diamond is a big deal. I mean, it doesn't happen that often.
What does diamond mean?
You got to sell over 10 million albums.
Wow. So that's better than platinum?
What's an album?
Yeah, what's an album?
Even better question. It's the opposite of streaming service, which everything's going to. In 2002, Stapp made headlines for all the wrong reasons. He was assaulted by his ex-wife Hillary when she threw an object at him, striking him in the face. What was the object?
I really want it to be like a Creed award or something. I really want it to be like best band ever. And he made it himself, and she took it and threw it at him. What did she throw and hit him in the face?
She broke his nose with this object.
Jeez.
Yeah.
An ashtray.
No, good guess. Classy lady.
A decanter.
No, you're not going to get it. Eric, do you know it? This was big news.
A vase.
No. A cell phone.
Oh, really?
She whipped her cell phone at him, hit him in
What
the
year?
nose, and broke his nose. 2002.
Well, 2002. You
Those
throw a
were
cell
bricks.
phone
Yeah, you're throwing a brick.
That's some weight to it. I'm going to guess it didn't have a glass case that was shatterproof. Okay, here we go. In 2014, Scott Stapp posted a series of bizarre videos on the internet claiming to be penniless, homeless, and broke. He also said people were trying to poison him, and he begged fans for money so he could record a solo album. How much money was he asking for fans? You got to get within, I'll say, $25,000.
Oh, are you serious? I was gonna guess like 5,000. Okay, $200,000, $250,000. I don't know, what is it? Oh, are you serious? More than that?
Recording an album is not cheap, apparently.
Not for Scott Stapp. $1 million. $500,000.
That's correct.
Are you? He asked for half.
He asked for $480,000, which is extremely specific.
He did his homework.
This is why I'm a big fan of Scott Stapp.
At the time, his new wife divorced him, saying that he was addicted to amphetamines, crystal meth, and steroids. His son tweeted that his father had been in a drug binge for 9 weeks, which is unfortunate.
That is unfortunate.
In early 2015, Stapp appeared on TV to talk about drug use and depression. Asked about the possibility of a future Creed reunion, he said to his former bandmates, "I can tell you what, I sure hope so. I love the guys with all my heart. And if they're watching, come on, guys, let's make a record." What show did he appear on?
Well, I don't know why Good Morning America was the first thing that popped in my head.
That show is way too classy, bro.
TRL?
No.
Is that still a thing?
I give you one more guess. Think like talk show.
Ellen?
Okay, we're going nowhere here. Dr. Oz.
That was my Dr. Oz?
Yeah. He's talking about drug use and depression.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, here we go. Last one. In 2015, Stapp announced that Creed would be releasing a retrospective album with rarities and acoustic version of hits. The album never came out, though, mostly because he joined the band Art of Anarchy following the death of Stone Temple Pilots frontman, who was named, and here's a hint, it's also Scott.
Scott.
We're looking for a last name.
Oh, you want the last name, too?
Stone Temple Pilots' former frontman,
I don't know.
who died.
Scott
Stapp took over.
Something. Scott. What's it start with?
Do you know it, Eric?
Scott.
Jones.
You need to work on your 90s alternative trivia.
Smith.
Y.
Miller.
You're not gonna get it.
Scott Stapp
Scott Weiland.
is everywhere. Oh, that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Well-
basically, the story here ends with Scott Stapp getting a rebound relationship with a new band. So that's why I was surprised if they were, reunited in some way.
They sang.
the other guys-
I just texted my brother and asked for the video.
Whew, all right, there is no easy transition.
Nope, we're
from
done.
Scott Stapp to
That's
Deuteronomy.
it.
We're going to try to make it.
All
All right, Andy, what do you know about the book of Deuteronomy?
Okay, well, I know that the purpose of the book. So my research for this comes from the ESV Study Bible.
I like that.
So
Sounds
if
reputable.
you want to read more about it, for those of you that are listening, it's a great study Bible.
Great.
One of my favorites. So this is where all this comes from. Anyway, the purpose of the book comes from the word Deuteronomy, which is the Greek word is supposed to mean second law, but it was actually a mistranslation. The original Greek word actually meant copy of the law. So essentially, it's like a re-preaching of the original law that was given at Sinai. The author's Moses. That's what traditional biblical critics would say. And then the original audience was the Israelites. Date of writing, it's really tough to date a lot of the Old Testament books, but this one they say sometime in the middle of the 15th through the 13th century, so sometime in those 300 years.
Oh, right on.
Setting, so the Israelites are waiting in Moab, and they're waiting to go into Canaan to conquer it. Key people are Moses and Joshua. Here are some of the mega themes that we'll see throughout the book. We'll talk about the uniqueness of God amongst other gods, and how God chose Israel, and how God was faithful to Israel even if they were not so faithful.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's really important when you look at the law. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are considered the Torah, and the law is what set the Israelites apart. They were the people that actually knew what God required of you to live and to stay in good favor with Him, so they believed.
Yeah.
So this book is revered, especially by Jewish people, and I still think it has value studying it today because it does reveal the nature of God. We may not be bound by the law. Some of the things in it may seem a little strange.
Yep.
But there's still a purpose for each and every one of those verses.
Yeah, I agree. I think I know a lot of Christians probably don't have much experience with Deuteronomy or even Leviticus or anything, but it's important.
It's possible. I've done Bible read through a year probably 10 times and stopped right around Deuteronomy earlier in my
picked it back up
younger
after Deuteronomy
days.
was over. Yeah,
Yeah,
that happens a lot.
It's weird. There's some weird parts.
I agree. Well, we'll see. The book kind of runs like this. You'll have Moses' first speech for like the first 4 chapters. And that's one cool way to look at it. Is this is a bunch of sermons given by Moses, or 3 or 4 sermons. Then he has a second speech or sermon that kind of splits into 2 categories. You have the general law, which goes from chapter 4, the end of chapter 4, through chapter 11. And then specific laws, those are the really interesting laws. Those start in 12 and go till 26. And then he has a third sermon where he talks about blessing and curses and some final instructions for the Israelites, because as we know, Deuteronomy is the last book of Moses. And then succession of leadership, so who's coming next?
Perfect. We've hit this on another podcast before, but I think it's important to say that when you read laws that just seem strange or odd or whatever, like, not all laws are equal in that, and hold on, don't pick up stones to stone me yet. Some laws were written for this specific people at this specific time. Other laws were written just for priests. Other laws had to do with the sacrificial system. So you really need to understand the context to figure out why it's there. And then sometimes there are moral principles that I think apply now and back then and for future generations as well.
I agree, yeah.
So, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and get into the Bible right now. So if you are wanting to follow along with us, you can grab a paper Bible or you can switch over to a Bible app. We're going to be in NLT today, New Living Translation. And we're going to have some questions as we go along. If you are listening by yourself, you can journal if you want. Or if you're with a group of friends, you can hit pause and discuss the questions. We'll do our best to answer them as well. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy 4. We're going to read 1 through 10 to begin. And now, Israel, listen carefully to these decrees and regulations that I am about to teach you. Obey them so that you may live, so that you may enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Do not add or subtract from these commands I am giving you. Just obey the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you. For you saw yourself what the Lord did to you at Baal Peor. There the Lord your God destroyed everyone who had worshipped Baal, the god of Peor. But all of you were faithful to the Lord your God, are still alive today, every one of you. Look, I now teach you these decrees and regulations, just as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may obey them in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. Obey them completely, and you will display your wisdom and intelligence among the surrounding nations. When they hear all these decrees, they will exclaim, how wise and prudent are the people of this great nation. For what great nation has a God near to them as the Lord our God is near to us whenever we call him? And what great nation has decrees and regulations as righteous and fair as this body of instructions that I am giving you today? But watch out. Be careful never to forget that what you yourself have seen. Do not let these memories escape from your mind as long as you live, and be sure to pass them on to your children and grandchildren. Never forget the day when you stood before the Lord your God at Mount Sinai, where he told me, summon the people before me, and I will personally instruct them. Then they will learn to fear me as long as they live, and they will teach their children to fear me also. So, Andy, what's going on here? It does sound like a sermon, right?
Yeah, I really enjoy reading this particular passage because we can always set Deuteronomy aside and say it doesn't really apply to us. But all the stuff he said here, it applies to us very specifically because though we're not going into a land to conquer, there's some interesting things that he tells us to do. Listen carefully to the teachings that God gives us. That's something we should do. That when we follow God's teachings, it gives us a better life. For them, it kept them alive, but for us, it gives us a better life. We're not supposed to add or subtract to the rules. Jesus talked a lot about that.
Yep. We don't get to pick and choose which rules.
Right, which we see a lot of nowadays, but even back in ancient biblical times, you see that wasn't something that was okay. And then this one was very interesting. So in verse 6, he says, when you obey them completely, you will display your wisdom and intelligence among the surrounding nations. And they're going to say,
that's key.
Look at how close this God is to them. And I think we forget this a lot. So obviously, just because you do Christian things or you read your Bible, you study Scripture, doesn't make you more saved. It doesn't ensure salvation, but it does allow you a more intimate relationship with God. And I think we miss out on that sometimes, that when people complain or when we say we don't feel close to God, it's probably because we're not trying to be close to God. And there is that, he says right here, when you do listen to my teachings, I will draw nearer to you. I think that's huge.
I think there's benefit to following God's laws, whether you believe in him or not.
Mm-hmm,
I think that naturally these laws lead to a rich and satisfying life. And it was interesting in Israel hearing our guide talk about kosher diet. And I don't want to say he's an atheist, but does not fear God.
Yeah.
He's like, you guys know the Bible better than I do, whatever. But he was so proud of kosher law because, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what I learned through the week, is he believes the rest of the world eats trash. And like he's super proud of the food he makes for his kids, and like the vegetables and the fruit that they've grown, and that they have all these dietary laws, and he just follows them because he feels like this leads to a better life. We're just going to do it, and he sees it as a way that. So I believe that partly that's true. I think God gave these laws to the Israelites. Number one, because he did want them to stand out from the rest of the nations. He wanted them to separate. Number two, he wanted them to obey. That increased in their devotion to God. And then number three, it led to them being a stronger people. Just by naturally avoiding, when you get into the not eating pork, not having shellfish. Pork was a dirty animal. Back then they didn't know how to keep it clean, and the pigs kind of live in their filth. Bottom feeder, I guess, type crustaceans and things that are on the bottom of the ocean floor, they can have disease and things that come with them. So some of these rules may not have seemed like it made a lot of sense, but I think it did really help the Israelites in a few different ways.
Yeah, I agree.
The other part, Andy, I think is interesting here is pass it on to your children and grandchildren.
Yep.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Kind of an oral tradition in society that they would.
Yeah, so you see this throughout the Old Testament, especially, but the way that even the way the New Testament was transmitted was orally. So when there's criticisms like, well, the Bible wasn't even written down, or the New Testament wasn't even written down until decades after. Well, that's because most people couldn't read. So the reason why Moses had to, instead of passing out written documents that say, here's what God said, instead he told them. And then when you read Hebrew, when you read the original scripts in Hebrew, it has like a cadence to it. A lot of the texts do, so that people could memorize them easily. So what they would do is they would have, when they would teach their children, it wouldn't just be like, okay, guys, sit around the table, we're going to read the Torah. They would recite the Torah, and they would have sometimes games that would help the children remember them and stuff. So it was definitely more of an art form than a study type thing.
All right, here's a question. What is a bit of wisdom that has been passed down to you from your grandparents or parents? What is something that your family highly valued growing up?
For me, I have one piece of wisdom I'll never forget from my grandpa, who's a brilliant man, and he still says, "You are rich if you have money left over after you pay the bills."
Really?
That's what he always said. If you have money left over after you pay the bills, little margin, he said that means you're rich. Now he has quite a bit of money, so he's not talking like, I'll just make this up. Yeah, he said like if you have money after you pay your bills, you take care of your expenses. If you have money left over, then you're a rich person, because the majority of people don't have that.
Huh.
But as far as something we valued growing up, we really valued time together, like big dinners, sitting down at the dinner table, that kind of stuff.
I remember my grandfather was super cheap. He was the cheapest tightwad you can ever imagine. I mean, just terrible. But remember one time he had a Swiss Army knife, and he said, I want to give this to you, but he goes, I want you to understand that it's of high value. So he goes, I want you to buy it from me. You can pay any price you want. So I gave him a penny, and he goes, okay, you bought it. Because to him, if it was free, then it wasn't of like great value.
That's amazing.
He was interesting. My dad has a lot of Rick Shortridge originals. He's growing up drove me a little crazy, but I realized that I pretty much redo all of them now with my own kids.
Sure.
And I could just give you a couple of the highlights. One is after he'd cut the grass, he would come back inside, just dripping with sweat, and he would have his shirt off, and he would chase us around the house and yell "sweaty belly kiss," and pin us down and rub his belly on our heads.
Sick.
Oh, it's so satisfying though when you're on the other end. Oh, it's incredible. Another one, another Rick Shortridge original is "That's How Shorty Died."
You've told me about this before.
Yeah, so he's at work, and if somebody does something stupid or dangerous, he says, hey, you can do that if you want, but that's how Shorty died. And he'll just walk away.
That's amazing.
One more. Every time we'd be in the car, we'd be driving, and he would point out the window and say, hey, look over there, there's a squeezer! And he would squeeze your leg really hard.
You've done that to me in your car.
Yes, I have. I do it all the time. It's hilarious. Again, so annoying growing up, but so satisfying on the other end.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. Sorry
No,
about
it's
the
good.
listeners for explaining those, but
Oh my gosh.
good times. All right, Deuteronomy 6. Let's go 1 through 10. Andy, you got it?
Yep. It says, these are the commands, decrees, and regulations that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you. You must obey them in the land you're about to enter and occupy, and you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live. If you obey all his decrees and commands, you will enjoy a long life. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you will have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. The Lord your God will soon bring you into the land he swore to give you when he made a vow to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a land with large, prosperous cities that you did not build. What's going on here?
All right, so again, Moses is hammering the importance of wisdom and passing this down and how important the law is. Again, earlier I said the Israelites are people of the book, they're people of the law. And they saw the importance, especially of getting children involved. I've heard that when young children are learning to read, they're learning Torah. It's kind of one and the same. And they would take a chalkboard and they would write the Torah on the chalkboard, and then they would take honey, which was, they didn't have candy back then, but honey was like the sweetest thing they could find.
Okay.
And they would paint the chalkboard with honey, and then the young children would come up and lick the honey because they wanted them to know how sweet the Word of God is. So they wanted that image like burned in their mind. But they, again, in Israel, Eric, you can attest to this. You see people, they will have bands tied around themselves that is Torah, They will wear it. It'll be on hats. It'll be everywhere. You see Torah all over.
Yeah.
There's constant reminders all over the place because it's so vital and so important. They did not want the people to fall away from the law. And you'll see this again and again in the Old Testament. When the Israelites decided, we don't really need to follow God's rules anymore. After a time of prosperity especially, God kind of lets them go to their own devices.
Yep.
And that's when a lot of the problems and being enslaved and other things come into play. So, question, if there's one bit of wisdom you could pass down to the next generation, what would it be?
One bit of wisdom to pass down to the next generation. Listen to the wisdom of the generation before you. I know that for people.
Do you think we value the wisdom of...
I think that it depends on the generation. I don't think millennials, I can say this as a millennial, I don't think
gosh, you're a millennial?
I don't think that we value we've been told that we're the smartest, all these things, so we don't value the wisdom of people that are ahead of us. And here at Cedar Creek, we're taught a lot to seek out, whether you want to call it a mentor, a coach, or somebody that's wiser than it's been there before, 5 years ahead, whatever. We're taught that, but it's not inherent. It's not inherent to the millennial culture for some reason. You don't need people ahead of you to teach you. You've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
So that'd be the wisdom I pass down, is to be humble enough to listen to somebody who's already done it.
I like that.
What about you?
Gray hair is a crown of splendor.
I've heard that. I don't have gray hair yet, though.
I got plenty.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly because my daughter. That's joking, kind of. So if there's one bit of wisdom I could pass down, the interns, they call me Uncle Lukey. I am a wise sage and an important figure for them. You were an intern once.
Yes.
And I had to pass down wisdom to you. I've developed a bit of wisdom when it comes to keeping buildings clean.
Yep.
I like to call them the 4 laws of janitoring.
Okay.
Do you remember the 4 laws of janitoring?
I remember.
I've taught these to you.
I know. It's been a while. I do. The one thing I remember I'll never forget, and I use this at my own house, to clean from top to bottom.
Yeah.
You always clean from top to bottom.
It's not one of the laws, but it's very important.
Yes.
Tell me what that means.
It means that, like, say you're cleaning a toilet, you don't start with the bowl and work up to the places that people touch. You start with the places people touch and get to the bowl.
There you go.
That way you're not, taking...
You don't remember the mop?
The what?
Oh, Eric.
I'll always treat your mop. What is it? It's something like she's your lady or whatever.
Yes,
like a lady.
that's law number 3. Respect your mop. She's a lady.
Then was there something about keys?
Yes, that's number 1. Don't forget your keys.
Oh, shoot.
Eric forgot his keys today.
Well, that takes us to law number 2.
What's that?
Remember your training.
Remember your always remember your keys. Remember your training.
Respect your mop. She's a lady. And number 4. Nothing?
No.
All right. If you find change on a desk and you take it, that is stealing. But if you find change on the ground, what change are you talking about?
That is number 4. Touche, my friend.
There you go. It's the one bit of wisdom I want to pass down to the next generation. All right, let's go to Deuteronomy 8. We're going to do 1 through 5, and then we'll jump to 10 through 20. Be careful to obey all the commands I am giving you today. Then you will live and multiply, and you will enter and occupy the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness for these 40 years, humbling you and testing you to prove your character, and you will find out whether or not you would obey his commands. Yes, he humbled you by letting you go hungry and then feeding you with manna, a food previously unknown to you and your ancestors. He did it to teach you that people do not live by bread alone. Rather, we live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. For these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out, and your feet didn't blister or swell. Think about it. Just as parents discipline a child, the Lord, your God, disciplines you for your own good. We'll go to verse 10 here. When you have eaten your fill, be sure to praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. But that it is a time to be careful. Beware that in your plenty you do not forget the Lord your God and disobey his commands, regulations, and decrees I am giving you today. For when you have become full and prosperous and have built fine homes to live in, and when your flocks and herds have become very large, and your silver and gold have multiplied along with everything else, be careful. Do not become proud at that time, and forget the Lord your God, who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. Do not forget that he led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions, where it is so hot and dry. He gave you water from the rock. He fed you with manna in the wilderness, a food unknown to you and your ancestors. He did this to humble you and test you for your own good. He did this so you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful. In order to fulfill the covenant he confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. But I assure you of this, if you ever forget the Lord your God and you follow other gods, worshiping and bowing down to them, you will certainly be destroyed. Just as the Lord has destroyed other nations in your path, you will also be destroyed if you refuse to obey the Lord your God.
Wow.
Kind of ominous.
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
Anything stand out to you here, Andy?
Over and over again, he tells them to remember or to not forget. And I think that was super important for them because they were going into a land. They were going to enter into a land with a lot of people that worshipped other gods. And it's very tempting to idolize things other than God. And that applies to us today. So even though we might not use words like Baal or all the other Asherah and that kind of stuff, we have things like television or sex or whatever. Even they had that too, but I think that's a thing that's been around forever. But we idolize other things. We take and worship things other than God, and his thing is remember what I've done for you. And I tell this to people all the time that are going through a tough season, because you have to be patient through it. You don't know when it's going to go away, but if you remember when God was faithful to you, it gives you a peace that nothing else does. So I like the amount of times he says to remember him and what he's done.
I heard Tim Keller's sermon the other day, and he said, sin is simply loving something more than God.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And we look at idol worship here, and we're like, again, why would you bow down
To some wooden thing, yeah.
Yeah, but it really is symbolic today of loving anything more than God.
Yep.
Letting something else take
Yeah, I
that
agree.
place. Question, have you ever fallen away from following God since becoming a Christ follower? If so, what happened?
It could be I'm guessing it doesn't just mean like
Define it
a
however you
long
want.
season. Yeah, of course. Certain things take your focus, and if you don't have people in your life that are you're allowing to constantly speak into it, it happens. I'm trying to think of like
All right,
specific time. Maybe you
You
got.
can think about it. Yeah, oh gosh, I can't remember who it was that said this. Somebody wise said that the main thing that will compete with your love for God is serving God, is ministry. Especially I think if you're in ministry,
Right.
that becomes the idol, is doing work for God, being seen. I remember I was doing junior high ministry. I think I'd been on staff here at the church for 3 years, 4 years. And my boss sent me to a conference for youth ministry. I remember sitting in the seats and thinking, I know all this stuff. I know everything there is to know about junior high ministry. Like,
Yeah.
why am I here? This is a waste of time. I
Right.
have this figured out. And, I went through almost like a mini bout of depression where I just lost joy in ministry. And
Sure.
I realize now, looking back, as a very naive 22, 23-year-old, it was my own pride. I thought I had it figured out. I saw some great success early in ministry. Things got difficult, as they always do. I had some people, drama, and conflict that happened. And instead of relying on God, I was relying on my own strength. And I truly did, I believe, let love for ministry replace love for God. And I had to confess. I had to go back to the heart of worship. So it doesn't, you'd see, geez, you're still going to church all the time. But just because somebody's on staff at a church or going to church every day or
Right.
whatever, doesn't mean that they can't fall away from God. I feel that I missed his heart.
Yeah, I think I could probably say similar. I don't know if I have a specific story of why I did, but ministry can easily get in the way of a good healthy relationship with God. I think there was a season there where I really struggled to pray, and part of it was just thinking I was too busy and having a kid for the first time.
Sure.
having a new child. And just convincing myself I didn't have the time to spend with God. And I think that when you don't have a healthy prayer life, or you're not consistently praying to God, then you naturally wander because you're not engaging with Him in a way that He designed us to. So maybe when we first had Ruby, so that was 2.5 years ago. For about 4 or 5 months, it was definitely a season of drought.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. There's a really cool book called The Land Between, talking about, and it talks about the Israelites, the time where they were not in Egypt, but not in the Promised Land. They were in this wilderness area. And if you ever feel like you're in a drought or you're just drifting or it's really a low spiritual point, I think that might be a great resource for
Sweet.
you. So good. And Oswald Chambers was the guy who said that. I can't believe I blanked on Mr. Chambers.
Mr.
All right.
Chambers.
Let's go to Deuteronomy 24, 10 through 19. This will be our last passage from Deuteronomy. Andy, you got it?
Yep. If you lend anything to your neighbor, do not enter his house to pick up the item he is giving as security. You must wait outside while he goes in and brings it out to you. If your neighbor is poor and gives you his cloak as a security for a loan, do not keep the cloak overnight. Return the cloak to its owner by sunset so he can stay warm through the night and bless you. The Lord your God will count you as righteous. Never take advantage of poor and destitute laborers, whether they are fellow Israelites or foreigners living in your towns. You must pay them their wages each day before sunset because they are poor and are counting on it. If you don't, they might cry out to the Lord against you, and it would be counted against you as sin. Parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children, nor children for the sins of their parents. Those deserving to die must be put to death for their own crimes. True justice must be given to foreigners living among you and to orphans, and you must never accept a widow's garment as security for her debt. Always remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from your slavery. That is why I have given you this command. When you are harvesting your crops and forget to bring in a bundle of grain from your field, don't go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all you do.
Cool. So, as you're reading, Andy, I was thinking of other biblical texts that these verses really relate to. Jesus quotes the Old Testament extensively.
Yep.
Also, we'll be talking about Ruth a few episodes from now. And this is a very important verse about how you harvest your crops, what you allow foreigners to take. So another thing about Deuteronomy that is fascinating is it is the backdrop for a lot of other biblical stories.
Yeah.
If you want to understand the New Testament, you've got to understand and study the Old Testament. It's really all connected and interrelated. But I love these passages here, especially about the poor. And one thing that sets Christianity apart from many other religions is its importance of taking care of the poor.
Yep.
Widows here are talked a lot about in Scripture because there was really, in this social system, in this day, widows really had no way to make money or
Right.
hold property. They were really just kind of, let's say there was no Medicaid in this time to take care of them or Social Security. They were kind of forgotten by society, and the Bible talks about the importance of taking care of widows. Same with orphans. Orphans didn't have parents, and it was very important for the Israelites to take care of those who are maybe a little more helpless or not able to take care of themselves, like orphans.
Yep.
So my question here, Andy, is do you struggle to love the poor, or does that come naturally for you? Was this attitude passed down to you from your parents? Why or why not?
To love the poor. I think I struggle with empathy as a general rule. It's tough for me to empathize with. I can sympathize with people and feel bad for where they're at.
Yeah.
But it's really hard for me to feel empathy sometimes. I'm not sure why.
Probably because you're a jerk.
Maybe. But when I do come across somebody who's living on this, I find it very hard to not, if I have cash on me, to not give it to them and want to pray for them.
Really?
I was with Casey Greenawalt.
You give people cash on the street?
Yeah, I've done it.
Oh, Andy.
Well, listen, I know the ramifications of that, but I also have done my piece with God, and I've said it doesn't matter to me that whatever they're going to do with it, I'm just going to trust Him in it. There are, yes, there are swindlers and.
Well, I called you a jerk because I'm the chief jerk. And I would never give money to somebody on the street.
And I know I've been had before, but it's more about, as we know with any sort of charity, it's more about what God's doing in your heart than what potentially the money's going to do.
Have you ever heard of blessed bread?
No, I haven't.
So I heard that apparently this is a thing in the hood, that when you give someone money, that you can pray for it, like with them, and just say, God, I pray that this money is used to feed their family, to help them, and if they don't use it in that way, let a curse come upon them.
No way.
Yeah, and they're like people, again, I'm hearing this all secondhand, but apparently the people in the hood know about this and don't like it, and they will get mad or even not take it if you pray over the money with them before.
Well, see, okay, so there was one time I was with Casey Greenawalt, we were driving around, he was a high school student, I stopped and I gave a dude money and I prayed over him. I didn't say, I'll curse you if you don't use this money, but I did pray over him. I've never heard of that, though. That seems
Have you heard that one of the guys that works on staff, I probably shouldn't name him, but he helps out a lot of our build outs and things like that.
Uh-huh.
He will do that when he gives somebody money. He'll like give them money and then hold their hand and go, God, please bless this money, and like we'll
Oh
like
my God.
pray
Really?
for the money for him. Yeah, it's basically the blessed bread.
That's crazy.
Prayer,
Interesting.
Right, for him, and it just goes amen and walks away. And it's like,
Now it's on you.
Oh.
Huh.
Yeah, so the attitude passed down from my parents. My mom is a nurse. My dad was in the Marine Corps and a police officer, so I have two very different.
Wow, yeah.
The one is the nurse who just really wants to help people. One was in the Marines, and so he was trained to do other things to people. And then, but now he's a police officer and he does love helping people. But
It's got to wear on you, though.
I had a mixed message of, yeah, especially, police officer. Being a police officer is definitely one of the more thankless jobs in the world.
I agree with that.
But yeah, so I didn't get really much from my parents as far as a consistent message on what to do about the poor.
Yeah, I would say, in general, my family is very generous and very helpful, but it is tough for me because I do see the poor choices people make,
Yep.
and I see to what it leads to. So I think this is an area I need to work on, truthfully.
Sure. Yeah, and I could see people have said to me before when I say I tend to just give my money to people like that, well, are you really helping them or hurting them? Again, it's the same way as like giving to a church. You don't get to ask what the church does with all
Yeah.
the money. You trust that you're giving away because that's part of what God wants you to do. So I don't know. I'm not like a you got to do what I do type person when it comes to that, but that's just the value I hold.
Cool. Well, I think as we think about the book of Deuteronomy, we see that God is a God of order, justice, and worship. And we're not bound by the Mosaic law, but we are blessed by studying it, and it does reveal and show the heart and nature of God.
Definitely.
And God cares for everybody, all people, which is pretty sweet. So
Yeah.
we definitely encourage you to go through Deuteronomy. I would say go through with the study Bible.
I agree.
Because otherwise you might get a little confused.
Yep.
But it's a cool book. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, I agree. That's there's a lot more to do, but we want you to find us on Facebook.
How do you do that?
You type in our names into the search bar on Facebook and you friend request us. We will accept you unless you look like a spam account, so no weird pictures. You can also email us any questions or comments you might have to podcast@cedarcreek.tv. You might get bounced back because our inbox is always full.
It's jammed.
So just to let you know, if you do get bounced back, it's because the producer wasn't doing his job. So if you like the podcast and you want to take our podcasting relationship to the next level, you can write a review in the iTunes store or whichever store. I don't know what the other one is. Remember to let people know they can access through iTunes or Cedar Creek app. You can share that on your social media accounts, and you can search in the Play Store. That's what it's called. I just got
Really?
it. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
It's the Play Store. That's where you
no
can get
idea.
the Cedar Creek app and get the podcast.
Sweetness.
Yeah, we're also on Twitter too. I'm on Twitter as well.
Got it.
More on Twitter than Facebook.
All right. Great job, Andy. Up
too.
next is Joshua.
Joshua.
It's going to be great.
Okay.
See you next time.
See ya.
Take me higher.
See ya. Of
You
him
sure it
singing.
was Scott Stapp?
Oh yeah. You can't sing Scott Stapp. Okay.
Andy, I've heard you do a Scott Stapp impersonation.
Maybe I'm
Can
the
you-
only one.
Can you take us home with a little
No.
Scott Stapp?
Not for the. They're not ready for it.
Buddy,
Sorry,
the
guys.
people need to hear it.
They can't.
Can you take us a little higher? The podcast has been okay, but we want to just take it a little higher.
I want to take me a little higher to a place with golden streets. Can you take me higher? No, I can't actually.
Oh.
Oh man, I'm getting chills right now. My spine is shaking, shivering.
I got a feeling Eric's gonna put this at the end of the podcast.
There may have been a time at a said sushi joint where I did karaoke to Scott Stapp. And one Lindsay Payne may or may not have the video of it. I'm not doing it.
You can't help yourself.
You can't resist.
He's singing along right now. He can't stop himself.
That's all I got. Maybe next time.
Thanks for playing along, Andy. You're the best.
You're welcome.